Of course, Greg Newsome was traded. By the way, the trade makes sense to me. Tyson Campbell was on a contract that was longer.
Yeah.
Already under contract. Anytime I see a Cleveland Browns player in the Andrew Berry, Kevin Stefanski era that gets to the last year of their deal, it's a strong possibility that they won't be back next year. And so to get something in return for a player that you was not going to re-sign, it made a lot of sense, especially when he's under control for the next two. I think there's no dead cap money after the 2027 season. So that's cool there. And it got us to thinking about other players who might possibly be out of here if we continue to lose. And of course, at the top of that list is one David Njoku. You've already drafted Hero Fanning.
Yeah.
Hero Fanning has already showed a lot of promise. David is on the last year of his deal. And you can get a lot for a tight end like David Njoku, who's a top 10 tight end in this league.
Yeah, listen, I think David is probably the guy that I'd look at and say is the most likely. If the losses pile up here, we got what? The trade deadline's November 4th, I believe it is. Mm-hmm. That first Tuesday. So we're like 3 weeks out now from it. And if I'm thinking about guys who are like next in line to get traded, I think David is probably at the top of that list. And I think for me, it's all about the context of like what's going on around him. Yes, they drafted a tight end that could theoretically be his replacement already next year. They obviously like doing 2 tight end stuff with Stefanski, especially if he's going to be back next year. But, is it worth paying this guy again? Now, the big thing with some of these deals, like guys in their last year of their deal, is that there is dead caps associated with a lot of these guys still. Right. David has, I think, it's like, I want to say David is like $24 million that he still has tied up in dead cap money. Yeah, $24 million if they were to release him or trade him at this point in the season. Obviously, they're not going to release him. But so they have to eat a good chunk of that. And that makes it complicated. Like, everyone's throwing out all these different guys that could be on the move. You got to remember, like, they can take on some, they're okay taking on some dead cap hits, but they can only take on so much of that, too. They're not going to, like, bombard themselves with it. So if it's like Wyatt Teller or David Njoku, it's probably one or the other, because I think Wyatt Teller's dead cap hit's like $19 million. I think the other one more so probably gets extended. And honestly, if I'm deciding between those two, I think Teller makes more sense to extend than David at this point, because as I look at this offensive line, we're all wrapped up in the quarterback, draft boards, right, for next year, for obvious reasons. But we also got to remember, like, this offensive line is all in the last years of their deal, except for the only other guy that started the season was Dwan Jones, and we don't even know if he can stay healthy at this point.
Right.
So aside from him, this whole offensive line is in the last year of their deal. Do we really think that they're not going to bring they're going to have to bring somebody back from this year's group to sort of just give you some stability? Joe Bitonio might retire, so I don't know if he's a given.
Jack Conklin might retire too.
Ethan Posic's a good center, but I don't know that like he's the guy you're investing in. Teller's been like a top, he's been one of the better guards in this league just in general the last several years since he's gotten to Cleveland. Like, he seems like the guy you'd invest in, where then it's like, okay, we have this dead cap money with him anyway. Let's give him a 3-4 year extension, push some of that money down the line again, and we can sort of balance the books better. I think Jack Conklin, who's playing well, I just don't think they're going to reinvest in him again because he's hurt all the time.
I think he might retire as well.
I can see that.
I mean,
honestly.
He already built his home in Cleveland.
I could see him testing free agency and then being like, I don't know.
Yeah, I think him and Joe Bitonio very likely are gone. And so I actually agree 100% with you said, because you don't want to be starting fresh with all new faces.
You can rebuild some parts of an offensive line. You can't build it all in one offseason.
Regardless if he's still rehabbing or not, DeJuan Jones will be returning next year. And I think it makes all the sense in the world to bring a guy that's respected in the locker room, that has proven to be productive on the football field back, and a guy like Wyatt Teller. Because as much as we talk about the quarterback position, whether it's Dylan Gabriel, Shedeur Sanders, or somebody else, the interior of that offensive line, we talk a lot about the tackles, but you want to make sure your interior is strong too. And I can see Wyatt Teller actually getting a 2-year deal, because you still don't know what you have in Zach Zinter, right?
Yeah. Well, so I think they know. I think that's the problem. He's inactive on game days. I think that tells us a lot that they don't think he's part of their future. And that's my point, though. Like, they're not going to be able to rebuild this entire offensive line in one offseason. You're going to have to bring somebody back. And so you already kind of have somebody in waiting to replace David Njoku, theoretically, in Harold Fannin Jr. So if you're moving on from somebody or you're trading somebody else, I think Njoku probably is at the top of that list, and Teller could be up there. But I just don't know I don't think both will get traded. And I don't think I think they got it. I think it makes more sense because the offensive line is in more of a dire situation right now than the tight ends position is in terms of the future.
You talk about guys that can be re-signed here. What about Jenkins?
I think he's on a 1-year deal, so I could see them theoretically being like, yeah, let's bring him back next year, even if it's in like a role where he's sort of like a fill-in guy again. It's all going to depend on what they do this offseason in terms of like making this group.
So coming back in 2026 right now, we got DeJuan Jones and Zach Zenner. Luke Whippler, too. Don't forget about Luke.
Yeah, I think Luke's probably back.
So you got Luke. So that's 3 guys that's coming back as of right now next year.
Yeah. Zender's probably back because he's on a rookie deal and they used a 3rd-round pick on him, but I don't know that he's
going
part
to
of their future.
If he's going to be productive or not. So,
I think DeJuan Jones, assuming Conklin's not back, I think DeJuan Jones could shift back to right tackle and you can see if he can play there. It's just going to be about if he stays healthy. I think he's proven he can be pretty solid in this league, but can he stay healthy is going to be the big question. But especially in a year where you might be trying to make your offensive line on the fly. All right, let's bring back DeJuan. DeJuan's still on his last year of his rookie deal. Let's get him out there, make him our right tackle. We keep Teller maybe in there, and then the rest we sort of have to fill out or whatever. Clearly, left tackle is still going to be a big question. We have no they just traded for Cam Robinson. Maybe Cam Robinson's the guy moving forward, or at least to fill in for now. But man, you talk about that jersey in the window of quarterbacks, kickers are up there in terms of names. Starting to feel like tackles are getting up there in terms of names since Joe Thomas retired. That position's been a carousel. And here's what's also interesting too. The other thing with the draft, everyone's like, all right, you got 2 first-round picks. You're taking a quarterback and you're taking a tackle next year. Guys, I'm here to tell you, offensive line play coming out of high school this year is one of the biggest out of college. In the year 2025 is such a crapshoot at this point. There's a lot of bad offensive line play, and there's a lot of bad offensive linemen in this league. I don't know that you're just guaranteed to take a tackle because people. I know you've talked about this too. The other thing I keep seeing people say is well, hey, I think the Browns should take Caleb Downs. If you're in a position where you can draft Caleb Downs over a tackle, but it's a tackle that you're kind of again, the offensive line right now in the NFL is not a sure thing. Guys that seem like they're guarantees aren't always guarantees anymore. And so because of that, I almost feel you take the sure thing. And Caleb Downs is a sure thing. That dude's talented. So
Caleb Downs is a beast, man. I think your points is right. I think your points are accurate because it's all of it is a crapshoot. We know who the projected top offensive lineman is going into this next upcoming draft, just like we know who the top projected quarterbacks is in every other position, et cetera. But it will be very interesting to see how our season continue to play itself out and what moves Andrew Berry make or continue or lack thereof that he makes going forward. You said something that's making me think. It's almost when they got their contract extensions, we don't know how long those extensions were. But we both believe coming into this season that Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry both had something that they needed to prove. That their back was against the wall, they were on a hot seat, and they needed to do something for lack of.
I subscribe to the idea that they are probably coming into the year safe because Jimmy Haslam said that.
But we needed to see something.
But things could change depending on but if things go completely off the rails, then that could change. And I think as you talked about throughout the show, that could be sort of going in different directions for both these guys, which is what's interesting.
So you look at the moves he's made in the draft this year, and it's been a quality draft class. This draft class, as you alluded to, at least 4 of those guys are going to be here for years to come, we do believe, and going to be major players on this team. And we haven't even seen Dylan Sampson honestly get worked into this situation yet. Dylan Gabriel has only made 1 start. We have yet to see Shedeur Sanders, so we still don't know about all of that. You look at the trade that he most recently made for Tyson Campbell. Depending on who you talk to, people look at that as a wash. I look at that as a win because I took a little heat for saying that I thought Greg Newsome was playing some of his best football of his career. A lot of people disagree with that, but to me, he was.
No, I don't think you're wrong with that. He's playing awesome.
Some people disagree with that. If you look at him playing at the level that he was playing as an outside corner, the price tag for him is going up.
They were going to have to pay him.
The Browns didn't plan on doing that. So you get you another quality corner who also was on the outside in Jacksonville, and if it wasn't for the injuries, he probably wouldn't have been traded to begin with. A lot of people believe if he's healthy, the Cleveland Browns got the better player in this deal. That's what some people believe, right? You look at that. You look at trading Amari Cooper away last year, and you get I think was it a third-round pick that we ended up getting?
Yeah, they got a third-round pick for the Bills.
We got a third-round pick from the Bills for Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper ends up retiring. When we take our emotions out of it, there is some good, just like it is with Kevin Stefanski, and then there's a whole lot of bad with Andrew Berry. And I'm not sure for most people if one good draft class or a couple good trades here and there is enough to say, you know what, you are safe. So I ask you, do you think Andrew Berry has separated himself from Kevin Stefanski?
So listen, I'm not going to sit here and be a fraud because I was somebody who was very critical of Andrew Berry's drafts to this point up until this year. And I said, I asked questions back in April. Do you trust him to be the one making certain picks for you? Do you trust him to be the one selecting a quarterback for you? I think all those things were warranted. I said, I understand he didn't have the first-round picks. Nobody told me he had to make that deal that lost those. And the best GMs in the sport, they're hitting on guys outside of the first round, frankly. I'm not saying it happens all the time. I'm not saying it's rare. But the guy that he idolizes down in Philly, in his mentor, and Howie Roseman, he has drafts where he hits on guys outside of the first round, and Berry hadn't really done that. So, I do think that Berry was very deserving of some of the heat that he was taking in terms of how his draft classes have turned out. At the end of the day, it's nothing personal for either of these dudes. It's all about in your job, the results need to be there, and Berry hadn't lived up to that. So I think this year, though, as we sort of said when we were responding to the caller last segment, I think that with the class he hit on this year, he's bought himself more time. Yes, and I understand it's a weird thing because it's we didn't like his previous draft classes and all this, but it is a lot about what have you done for me lately? And this year coming into the season, knowing that the criticisms of how he had drafted up until this point were fair, this year he knocked it out of the park. If he'd only hit on one guy in this draft, maybe we would be having a different conversation. If they had drafted Mason Graham at 5 and he'd been lights out and he's been really good, and we're hey, we like that pick, but then everybody else had been a bust, or if Quinshawn had gotten suspended and whatever, which I guess that technically still could happen, but of course, then we'd be having a different conversation. Then we would be asking ourselves is Andrew Berry worth retaining? But when you hit on 4 guys, hypothetically, we think he's hit on 4 guys in this class, it's hard for me to have a lot of pushback on he didn't do enough to keep his job in the meantime. And honestly, he might have done enough to save him and Kevin Stefanski's job together if they're really linked, like the Browns have sort of framed this. But if you're asking me to pick one or the other, I think Berry is on a trajectory. It's kind of ironic how this played out because I think even last year it was the opposite. I think Stefanski was on the trajectory towards sticking around beyond Berry. Now I think it's maybe flipped. If you have to pick one or the other, I think Berry has done enough to sort of say, I'm here. And it's kind of on Stefanski to take this draft class and get better results from it on the field to kind of make sure that he's also part of the equation. Maybe Berry saved Stefanski's job this year and Stefanski saved Berry's job in some of the previous years. I can wrap my head around that, which is maybe why the summation of all this is they both get to come back next year and try again. And that's fair. And listen, at the end of the day, Berry has to wear the Deshaun thing. I know that they called it a group effort. I know that Jimmy Haslam's, he said back at the owners' meetings, you can put it on me, I'm the owner. But at the end of the day, a trade goes on the GM's resume. And it sounds like he played a somewhat of a more of a pivotal role in this than anybody else. So, he has to wear that. He's trying to dig himself out of that hole. I think Berry certainly bought himself some more time with the way he drafted this year. And at least to Ryan's point, he said, Berry's draft this year has me intrigued. Or he said, I'm not speaking in exacts, but about next year, I think he has at least given himself the runway to go in the next year and be all right, I've gained some trust back now, and now I get a chance to try to do it again in 2026. And if you can do it again in 2026, maybe everyone's fine and they stay for a longer term than just next year. But I think Berry has bought himself some time. I think Stefanski is still TBD based on how this season ends. I think that's just how it should be.
I just think it's hilarious that going into this season, the Cleveland Browns roster was ranked one of the bottom 5 rosters in the NFL. When going into the 2024 season, the Cleveland Browns roster was ranked in
One
the
of the
top
best.
11 and 12.
There's a lot of
and it's about 50, 60% of those players that's still on this team.